Hi, welcome to the Reloading Podcast, episode 6. Today, we're talking about gunpowder. First, this is just going to be a brief episode. We're just going to cover a couple little informational things and show you a couple examples of powder. I still haven't gotten that whole talking and moving the camera around, so bear with me. I'll get it eventually. I hope. If not, then you guys can send me nasty emails and nasty letters. By the way, we do actually have a show email now, and I'll put that in the show notes. So, moving up in the world. Today, we're just going to I'm just going to basically go over a couple of brief items on gunpowder. Starts out, black powder was basically there is no real set ability of historians to decide who invented it and when. General consensus is it was China somewhere in the 10th century. They primarily used it for fireworks, which we still do today, and what they called rockets. If anybody's watched some of the episodes of Mythbusters, they actually had one where they went through and recreated those rockets the Chinese used to use. Mainly they used them for signals. Eventually they kind of, like everybody else in the world, figured out, hey, well, we can use this in war. Didn't really get true potential until the Europeans got out to China and realized, oh, we can use this for shooting stuff. And thus the great gunpowder chase was on. The powder we use currently, which is and everything but your what they call affectionately called smoke bowls, your muzzle loaders, whether it's an inline muzzle loader or an old-fashioned flintlock or matchlock or even a percussion cap. Those all use still black powder or variants thereof black powder. Black powder consists of saltpeter, which is potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal or carbon, depending on how you want to call it. Smokeless powder, however, was invented. This is something that they do know for sure. It was invented by a Frenchman named Paul Vielle. Sorry, I don't speak French, so I apologize. Didn't mean to slaughter your last name. And he called it poudre B, which was short for poudre blanche or white powder, because it distinguished from black powder. Kind of looks the same until you really get into the details as far as, the color still is black. But originally it was made from 68.2% insoluble nitrocellulose, 29.8 soluble nitrocellulose, gelatinized with ether and 2% paraffin. I got that information from Wikipedia, checked a couple other sources, pretty much general consensus, that's the information. Smokeless powder continues to be redesigned today by different companies. There isn't a lot of powder companies left. There's only a couple powder plants in the world. I didn't want to really get into specifics and all that. It's just kind of an overview. But there's a couple of them that make base, and then you've got your different companies that kind of, tweak it here, there, however. It's really just a couple different basic forms. There's ball, which is this little spheres, and then there's extruded, which is forced into cylinders. What they do with the extruded then, they change that out. Anywhere from different cylindrical designs with holes in the center, different holes, double holes, triple holes, 6 holes, all sorts of different designs, to flake, which is just basically you take your cylinder and you chop off the end, get a little flat piece. I've got a couple of examples here I'm going to show you in a minute, so kind of give you a demonstration. As you saw by the flash there, when you light powder and it's in the open, not really a problem. Create some smoke, nothing really big. It's not until you put that into the cartridge, and then you primed cartridge, and you put that into the primed cartridge, and then you cram the bullet on top, that it actually becomes dangerous because it builds pressure then. Or you put it in some other container, like your handy dandy powder container. This The reason they're made of plastic now, plastic will melt, it'll relieve the pressure. They used to be stored in metal. Metal containers wouldn't necessarily, so they made the caps so they'd pop off. Either way, you relieve the pressure, you don't get the explosion. Unlike cartridges, like so, that's self-contained. Now, in the event of a fire, you've heard the rumors, because this cartridge, if I threw it into the fire, yes, it would pop. Yes, the lead, unless the lead melted first, would actually go through the air. However, it would not go through the air with the same velocity as if I had it in the chamber of a firearm. Chamber of a firearm with a bolt lock behind it, that generates a different amount of pressure. There's nowhere for that to go. If this is in a fire, when it pops off, the bullet will go one direction, the brass will go the other direction, and it'll alleviate a lot of the pressure. Plus, that's an immediate release of pressure, whereas in the chamber, all that pressure is pushing a lot harder and a lot more force. When they're talking about reloading data, and they're talking about tables, and they're talking about maximum pressure, maximum CUP, what they're talking about is this is the maximum safe pressure according to SAMI. We've covered SAMI a couple times already, especially when Jim and I are talking. And basically what it is they take different cartridges, they make up different test systems, usually sometimes with firearms, sometimes with not. And what is the maximum pressure that this particular firearm load can handle safely, to where you're not going to have to worry about it blowing up your gun or you know, anything along that lines. Usually, as long as you're following the specs, you're making sure you're double checking your measurements and you're not double charging a case, you're not going to have to worry about SAMI specs. When I personally load, I usually don't even get within 10% of that. I will make sure I stay below. The one thing you'll notice as you get into this and you start doing it more and more, the closer you get to that max, the more, yes, you can get it to go farther. However, you're going to suffer accuracy because of that. Just because of the fact that you're putting more pressure on that bullet, tends to distort it a little more going down the barrel. Once it hits the air, it's not in the same ballistic coefficiency because it is a little deformed, and you're not going to notice the deformation. You know, if you shot it and managed to capture it, then you could possibly measure it with fine devices and be able to check. But we're talking literally maybe a millionth of an inch. It's not going to be a lot, but you know, translated onto accuracy, that can make it so instead of a sub MOA, it's now a 1.5 MOA or something like that at 100 yards, or worse, depending on how bad they're damaged. One of the things that you'll find is powders do have different burn. The big common catchphrase you'll hear is burn rates. While burn rate does state how fast or slow it burns, it doesn't really honestly mean anything. It kind of gives you a basic overall idea of how fast or how slow a powder burns, and kind of gives you an idea of how full or not full you should have your case. If you have a powder that's a slower burning powder and you're trying to run a lighter load, usually not a good idea, due to the fact that when they design the recipes and they design the loads, it's with the understanding that that bullet's going to be moving at a certain point in time. If you have a really slow burning powder, you can generate too much pressure because the bullet's not moving. The bullet hasn't released, and excuse me. And so what happens is that bullet just kind of sits there and sits there and sits there, and eventually the pressure gets too much before the bullet can actually move because the pressure hasn't gotten to the bullet. So your case is, you know, say this long, and the powder is only filling up the back third. Well, the powder lights with the primer, and you've got this pressure. Well, you've got this pressure that's got to go from here to the bullet, which is out here. What happens is between here and here, it reaches, you know, over your max pressure, and the case bursts. So the bullet never leaves. The bullet's still stuck in the chamber, and the whole case bursts. Well, the pressure has to go somewhere. Usually it'll drive the bullet down the barrel. If you're lucky, that's all it'll do. A lot of times That's not the case. You can have catastrophic firearms failures. If it's a rifle and you're shouldering it like this, your action's right here. That's coming back in your face. If it's a pistol, if you're lucky, you've got it way out here, and it blows out and doesn't get to you. Either way, it's a very dangerous situation. As Jim and I, if you've listened to Jim and I, Jim's my co-host. Every other week we get together and do a roundtable discussion and kind of talk on different topics, and he's got a little over 30 years experience in reloading, and he actually is the moderator and creator of the Reloading Room on Facebook. So we get together and it's a good time. Usually it's Sunday nights at 6. If you go to the Google Plus page, you'll see the notice for when we're going to get together and talk. So come join us. There's we have a Q&A session, so you can put questions. If you have questions for us, we'll try and answer them during the session, or you can send them, just post them on the web page or on the Google Plus page beforehand, and we'll try and answer them if we can. Back to the pressure. Sorry. Rabbit hole. Squirrel. It happens. Everybody has those problems where all of a sudden, squirrel! But at least this squirrel was related to the topic. Anyway, so as we were staying, that case bursts and you've got shrapnel flying all over the place. If you're lucky and it's a bolt action rifle, usually they're designed to handle it. But if you get too much pressure, even the bolt action is going to fail. You'll shear the lugs right off the bolt comes shooting back, and yeah, it's going into your shoulder if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, some people have had bolts go into their neck. Pistols, slides come flying back. Don't be dumb. The reason the maximum pressures are there is for a reason. It is because they have safely tested under laboratory conditions how hot you can go before you have to start worrying about blowing up a firearm. I understand everybody wants to try and go faster, longer, but it's not worth it. It really is not worth it. Your life is not worth getting an extra, keeping it from dropping an extra 2 feet to 1,000 yards. It really isn't. If you want to shoot longer distance, get a better gun. Get a better caliber. If you have to hotten your loads to the max pressures to get them to go that far, then yes, it's cool because you've extended the capabilities of the firearm. But it's stupid because at the same time, you're overextending your rifle for what it's designed for. Your rifle is designed, yes, they over-engineer them, they plan on better than SAMI specs. But they do that for a reason. Because they know there's idiots out there that are going to try and exceed those SAMI specs, and they don't. They're trying to make sure that they protect themselves. However, some people do it. So, personal recommendation, don't go over the specs. I realize there's wildcat issues, which is a whole different thing, and eventually we'll get into wildcatting. It's a fun, exciting, cool thing, but at the same time, even the wildcatters weren't going over the specs. They were creating a whole different rounds and everything, but they were trying to use really good information. So, how about we look at that powder now? I'm gonna take you guys on a road trip. Well, not really. You're just gonna kind of go over here. So, as you can see, there's the residue from the powder. Not really much there. So, I'm trying out a couple different lighting things because, I'm not lucky enough to have all the cool money to be able to spend all the money on all the fun stuff. So, here's your extruded. You can see it looks like this is one of the extrudeds. This is a cylindrical. This powder is actually IMR. Ooh, how's that table look? This is actually IMR 4350. And the next one up is a unique, which is a flake. Basically, it's a cylindrical that they just, chop the ends off and make it really flat. And our third and final is the one I use for my good old-fashioned 308, and that's Win 748. This one here is a little ball powder, and you can see, we'll see if we can get a little more light in there. That's a little harder to see. It's no fun when you set your flashlight down and don't remember where to put it. So now you can kind of see it's just a little balls. Kind of looks like really small ball bearings. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of each are quite interesting. With probably the one I prefer using most of the time is the ball powder. The reason for it, it fills up the case really nice. However, with a 308, it works really nice. Fills up the case pretty good. However, the problem is, it doesn't fill up the case fully. So what you do is you get some settling and stuff. I've tried a couple different powders and not really had a lot of success with some of the extrudeds that didn't fill the case right. Ideally, you want to really, in your perfect world, perfect situation, you want to actually get a powder that fills your case completely so the bullet packs it tight. That way you're going to get your most consistent if you're trying for accuracy. With the Win 748, I've actually gotten it so as long as I make sure when I go to put it in the gun, I reasonably shake it or whatever, you know, and get the powder dispersed a little bit, then it burns pretty well and it's pretty accurate. Bench shooting, I've had all 5 rounds touching at 100 yards, which is kind of all the more serious I'm looking for. It's a deer hunting round. My coyote rounds, I don't use Win 748, I use a different powder for it. That's extruded, that does fill it up a little more. I'm using 125 grain ballistic tip in that one. So, as you can see, even though it's the same cartridge, different loads. And at some point in time, we'll go through and I'll load some of those up and we'll do a demonstration on those. Now, with your flake powder, which is the one I'm using for the 40, which you guys have seen, that one pretty much fills up the case. So when you see the bullet, it packs it down nice and tight. That's because it's about the right mix for the grain. If I had an extruded powder, it would probably be about the same. Even though they're different shapes, you're still going to use, you know, similar weights. It's not like you're going to have, you know, 10 grains of one and 2 grains of another, not necessarily, because it's still by weight, not necessarily by volume. Now, when you get into some of your other things, like, you know, you're using Lee powder dippers or different things like that, or your powder dispenser, some of those are set up by volume, so it may calculate a little different, but you're still going to wind up you're going to make sure that it's within the same kind of pressure range, because there is specified ranges for each caliber. It's not necessarily, you know, you can have say 45,000 CUP in one powder for 308 and then 65, you know, or 110,000 in another powder. You're still only going to be able to have that max CUP because that's the max pressure that's going to be able to handle. So like I said, until you you know, enclose that powder in something, it's not a dangerous item. It kind of makes a cool little flash. And that was kind of the basic overview of powder today. I thank you for hanging out. I thank you for continuing to you know, tune in. And I want to thank Jake and the Firearms Radio Network for giving us the opportunity to be able to bring reloading to you. I want to thank Sean Herron of We Like Shooting. He's been very helpful in a lot of tips and helping me get set up and going. And I definitely want to thank Jim Fleming for coming on board and helping out. Like I said, go to the Google Plus page. It's Google Plus Reloading Podcast. The YouTube page is Reloading Podcast. We got a Facebook page for Reloading Podcast. Working on the website. It's coming. I'm not in charge of that because I don't really have any website talent. So, but hang in there, and we just ask you to keep tuning in. And if you have ideas of something you want covered, send us a note. Okay, we will have the show notes, a link to the show notes and the audio feed on the Facebook page and the Google Plus page. So if you want to get some of that information, I've got a lot of the notes on there, and then I'll have also I'll have a couple links to like the different powder sites, and we'll get that all set up for you. I thank you once again for your continued support, and like I said, go to the Google Plus page, go to the Facebook page, let us know what you want to hear. You can usually find me in the Reloading Room. If you're in the Madison, Wisconsin area, you know, I'd love to get together with you. If you want to get into reloading but you're not sure how, I'll be more happy to help you out. Whether it's helping you get equipment or having you, come over and check out my setups and go through and see how it's going, I'm more than willing to help out. It's a great hobby, and we want to get anybody and everybody that wants to get involved. We want to try and give you the chance, give the information and the ability to be able to do this. All right, thank you much, and have a great time at the range.